You trudge along Place Vendôme in the tender gray of a Paris morning, where the air smells faintly of roasted chestnuts and exhaust from the early taxis. The Ritz squats at the square's edge like a silk-clad grandparent, serene and smug in its knowledge of who it hosts and what it hides. You feel the cobblestones under your shoes, their dampness clinging through the soles. Somewhere a bellboy hauls in a trunk heavier than most people's monthly rent, his cap tilted at an angle that says he's done this 1,000 times. You pause, letting your gaze travel up the Ritz's facade, perfectly polished windows, golden light spilling from its lobby, and that quiet hum you can't quite hear but somehow feel. Inside, the clink of porcelain teacups competes with the soft thump of newspapers being folded by men in tailored suits. You slip in through the revolving door like a ghost, your footsteps muted by plush carpets the color of champagne. At this hour, the lobby is a polite parade. A silver-haired couple drifts toward the elevators. A concierge in an immaculate waistcoat glides behind his desk, smiling as if paid by the grin. To the left, boutiques sparkle under artful lighting, tiny kingdoms of gold, platinum, and diamond. Each display case is its own galaxy, the jewelry floating under glass like suspended stars. Somewhere beneath all this civility, something hums louder than the heaters. It's not the Ritz's famous pastry oven or the quiet swish of mops against marble. It's the ticking of a different kind of clock, the kind that counts down not to tea time but to impact. The city outside doesn't know yet. The pigeons flapping above Place Vendôme aren't concerned. But you feel it, the way you sometimes sense a storm before the clouds gather. It's in the way one man in the lobby glances at the clock, then at the front door, then at nothing at all. And you, standing there with hands in your pockets, realize you're breathing slower, as though you might hear the next chapter before it's read aloud. Paris is waking up, and the Ritz is ready for another day in the spotlight, though not in the way it expects. Somewhere across the square, in the hushed folds of the morning, the first pieces of a plan are already in motion. And when they meet this glittering fortress, it won't be for tea. You drift deeper into the Ritz, past the genteel murmur of the lobby, into corridors that smell faintly of polished wood and something sweet. Maybe a distant tray of madeleines on its way to a suite. The further you walk, the more the air seems to thicken, as if it's heavy with the scent of old money and unspoken rules. The boutique wing curves like a discreet smile, each storefront framed in gold trim, its name embossed in lettering so elegant you half expect it to bow. Cartier, Chaumet, Van Cleef & Arpels, names that, to most people, live only in glossy magazines and daydreams. The glass cases here aren't just displays, they're altars. Necklaces that could pay off a row of Paris apartments sit on velvet like captured lightning. You hover near one case, the gems throwing back the light in tiny flares, so sharp they make you blink. A saleswoman, perfectly coiffed, floats toward you, her heels silent against the carpet. Her smile is cordial but measured. She knows the look in your eyes is curiosity, not a credit limit that could survive the transaction. She hovers just long enough to make her presence known, then retreats with the grace of a ballerina in slow motion. In a corner, a man in a camel coat studies a watch that costs more than a mid-range car. He turns it over in his hand with the casual air of someone deciding between almond or butter croissants. Behind him, the reflection in the mirror gives away the room's other purpose, surveillance. A small, near-invisible camera blinks softly in the corner, its red eye almost shy about what it's watching. You can almost hear the building breathing. The walls have learned to swallow whispers, to smooth over tension before it wrinkles the air. Still, if you look closely enough, there are seams. The guard near the far door glances at his phone a little too often. The glass cases, despite their elegance, reveal fingerprints if the light hits just right. And the security gates at the entrance to the boutique arcade, they're decorative as much as functional, the sort of thing you'd see in a jewelry commercial. Reassuring to shoppers, but less intimidating to anyone with nerve and planning. This is a place designed to flaunt its treasures, trusting its aura to shield it from audacity. But aura, you remind yourself, is not armor. Somewhere, not too far from here, Someone is counting on that mistake. They've studied the angles, the shift changes, the fact that in winter the street outside is darker longer, giving shadows more time to work. You find yourself staring longer than you should at a diamond bracelet. It's ridiculous. Each stone the size of a raindrop, arranged in a perfect circle, clasped so subtle it's practically telepathic. It radiates the sort of cold beauty that makes you think of glaciers and unblinking eyes. You don't notice the faint vibration in your pocket until it's over. Your phone, buzzing once, a reminder you didn't set. When you look up, the man in the camel coat is gone. So is the watch he'd been handling. The saleswoman has drifted behind the counter, rearranging nothing. The guard by the far door glances again at his phone, and you can't tell if it's boredom or a signal. You exhale slowly. This diamond heart of the Ritz beats steady for now, but the arteries feeding it are starting to tremble. You step back out into Place Vendôme, the air colder now, your breath curling into little clouds that dissolve before they reach the sky. Across the square, the facades look identical, stone and symmetry, each building a sibling in an old, aristocratic family. But you know the Ritz's pulse hides something different today. Somewhere close, unseen eyes are watching the same square you are, mapping movements, timing footsteps. The crew, though you wouldn't pick them out of a crowd, has been rehearsing for weeks. Not in abandoned warehouses or cinematic safe houses, but in the mundane spaces no one notices. A back alley where one man practices swinging a weighted object with precision. A cluttered garage where another kneels over a scooter engine, stripping it and rebuilding it until the sound is just right. A borrowed basement where the group studies floor plans taped to the wall like a school project. In those rehearsals, the sound of shattering glass is imitated with cheap tumblers, and the precious seconds between entry and exit are timed with a kitchen timer. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. You imagine them in winter coats, moving through drills like dancers marking choreography, each beat counted, each pivot sharp. Their plan depends on invisibility before the strike, blending so well into Paris that even the most alert security guard would skim over them like a punctuation mark in a novel. In one rehearsal, the leader, calm, slow-spoken, had them stand still in a crowded cafe for 20 minutes without ordering a drink, just to feel what it's like to be invisible in plain sight. If someone noticed, the exercise failed. They've learned to carry their tools casually, slipping crowbars into messenger bags, hiding screwdrivers alongside pens and receipts. To anyone else, they're just men with errands. But those same men have practiced disassembling a display case lock in under 6 seconds. The trick isn't force, it's knowing the exact moment the tension releases. A fringe rumor drifts through your mind, something you overheard at a smoky bar near Les Halles last week. One of the crew once worked in hotel maintenance at the Ritz. If it's true, they wouldn't just know the layout. They'd know where the cameras have blind spots, where the guards take smoke breaks, which doors stick in the cold. Of course, it could just be bar gossip. In Paris, half the crime stories are seasoned with lies before they leave the storyteller's mouth. From where you stand now, the square seems almost too still. The sound of an approaching moped buzzes faintly down a side street, cutting through the quiet like a warning. You see no one suspicious, just a delivery boy in a bright jacket, balancing a box of pastries. But you file it away. Rehearsals can't control the weather or the random appearance of strangers. That's why the crew has backup plans stacked like cards, routes, hideouts, and the simple but vital rule: never all together in one place until the moment arrives. You look toward the hotel again, its windows reflecting the pale winter sun. Inside, the jewelry still sits under glass, patient and pristine. The crew will never see it this way, lit for admiration. They'll see it as weight, resale potential, risk. You take a step back from the curb, imagining the line between preparation and execution as thin as a single breath. Somewhere nearby, that breath is being held. You move along the edge of the square, letting your hands rest in your coat pockets, and your eyes catch the kind of details tourists skip. A messenger bag leaning against a cafe table. A pair of work gloves peeking from a jacket sleeve. A folded newspaper, thicker than it should be, left on a bench. All harmless on their own, but together they have the faint scent of purpose. Tools, when you picture them, are usually obvious: a crowbar, a drill, something that gleams under dim light in a movie close-up. But here, the ingenuity is subtler. You pass a man sipping espresso with a rolled umbrella propped beside him. The handle is heavier than it looks, weighted with something that would crack a display lock in 2 precise hits. Another figure walks by holding what seems to be a camera tripod. The legs are hollow, perfect for hiding slender cutting tools. Even a takeaway coffee cup could be more than it seems, double-walled to disguise a small glass punch inside. You remember something a retired detective once told you: the best thieves never look like thieves. They look like people who forgot something at home. That's the art here, blending the tools into life's background noise, so well that they're just part of the city's static. You catch sight of a battered black duffel slung over a man's shoulder as he disappears down Rue Daniel Casanova. It swings lightly, but you can tell by the way he adjusts it that it's not empty. In your head, you can almost see what's inside: leather gloves, a handful of small LED lights, a few disposable SIM cards, maybe even a hotel map printed on cheap paper so it can be burned later without fuss. Fringe trivia drifts into your thoughts about a famous French jewel thief from the 1980s who used to carry his tools in a violin case. The police, when they caught him, found out he couldn't play a note. They laughed, then arrested him anyway. Different decade, same principle. Hide the extraordinary inside the ordinary. From your spot near the curb, you notice how the street itself conspires to help. The cobblestones make any heavy footsteps sound duller, muffling the thud of running feet. The boutique windows create perfect reflections, a natural mirror for anyone to check behind them without turning their head. And the crowd, light this time of year, but still enough, provides cover for those who know how to weave through it without bumping a single shoulder. A silver van idles a little too long at the corner. Its side panel bears the name of a catering company, though you don't see any trays or uniforms. The driver taps the wheel once, twice, and you wonder if it's impatience or rhythm. You can almost imagine the van as a temporary vault on wheels, ready to swallow a duffel bag and drive into anonymity before anyone decides it doesn't belong here. The tools, the carriers, the disguises, they're all in motion now, trickling into position like drops of oil spreading through water. You can't see the whole picture yet, but you can feel it taking shape. And in this quiet, ornate square, where the jewelry sparkles behind glass and the air smells faintly of wealth, no one else seems to notice. That, you realize, is the most powerful tool of all. You slip into the rhythm of the square, letting your pace match the flow of Parisians who know exactly where they're going and have no time to explain it. The morning has ripened into something busier, more clatter from the cafe terraces, more impatient honks from the narrow streets feeding into Place Vendôme. It's the perfect camouflage, this everyday symphony of a city waking up. Somewhere to your left, a delivery truck backs into a space with a beep 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 that feels almost like a metronome. To your right, 2 tourists argue softly over a folded map, turning it this way and that like it's a magic trick they can't quite figure out. In the middle of all this, you notice them, 3 men in heavy coats, walking separately but with an invisible tether between them. Their eyes flick in the same directions, their hands stay loose at their sides, and they never quite break pace. The leader, though you can only guess by the subtle way he glances at the others, pauses at a shop window. He leans in to examine a row of watches, but you see his reflection scanning the street behind him. A nod, so slight it could be mistaken for a shiver. That's the cue. Misdirection, you realize, is the lifeblood of what's about to happen. Across the square, a man in a red scarf fumbles with a paper bag, spilling oranges onto the cobblestones. It's clumsy enough to draw the attention of a passing concierge and even a patrolling officer, who crouches to help gather the runaway fruit. You can't prove it's staged, but the timing feels too neat. Winter in Paris gifts the conspirators another advantage: longer shadows. A side street stays in darkness well into the late morning, making it a natural curtain for anyone slipping into or out of view. A small scooter turns down that street now, its rider wearing a full-face helmet despite the mild chill. The sound of the engine is swallowed quickly by the narrow alley. A fringe tidbit comes to mind about how, during another high-profile Paris theft years ago, a gang used a street performer as a distraction, setting off firecrackers that the crowd mistook for part of the act. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the thieves were gone, swallowed by the maze of streets like a coin into a magician's hand. You glance back toward the Ritz. The doormen stand just as they always do, their posture regal but relaxed. Guests filter in and out without a second thought. To them, this is just another day in one of the world's most luxurious addresses. But you can feel the tension thickening, like a theater audience holding its breath before the curtain rises. One of the three men drifts toward the hotel entrance now, moving at an unhurried stroll. Another disappears around the corner, likely toward the boutique wing's discreet side door. The third lingers in the square, adjusting his gloves. To the casual observer, they're strangers. To you, they're pieces falling neatly into place. Somewhere, a clock ticks closer to the moment when all this casual motion will ignite into chaos. And when it does, the city won't see it coming. Not until glass explodes and diamonds dance in the air like snow. The air shifts in a way you can't quite define. No louder, no colder, but charged like the seconds before a string snaps. The street hum fades beneath the sharper, more mechanical sound, a sudden, clean metallic crack. It's not the clumsy bang of a dropped tool. It's precise, deliberate, the kind of sound that turns heads without yet sparking alarm. You pivot toward the source, just in time to see the boutique's side entrance shudder against its frame. A lock gives way under practiced force, a motion so swift that if you blinked, you'd miss it. The doormen are still at their posts, but one glances toward the sound, his brow folding. Inside, the breach ripples outward like a stone hitting still water. Conversations stumble mid-sentence. A clerk's hand freezes halfway through arranging a necklace. You step just far enough forward to glimpse the narrow hallway beyond the side door, where two figures in dark coats slip through, their movements brisk but unhurried, like people with the authority to be exactly where they are. The Ritz's hum falters. It's subtle, a shift in the background noise, as if the building itself has inhaled. You take a slow breath with it. There's no shouting yet, no running. That will come later. This is the moment where everything still has the chance to pass as normal, if you don't look too closely. You remember hearing once about a Paris gang that specialized in what police called soft entries, breaking in without smashing, forcing, or cutting anything visible from the outside. Here, though, the crew seems to have traded subtlety for speed. The metallic crack wasn't gentle, it was a statement, a dare to anyone close enough to hear it. From where you stand, the details sharpen. One of the figures pulls the door shut behind them, not to keep people out, but to create the illusion nothing has happened. The glass doesn't rattle. The hinges don't squeak. It's almost courteous. A fringe thought intrudes about how in some old French cathedrals, the bells would ring differently in emergencies, as a coded warning to the townspeople. Here, the bell is that sharp metallic snap, and only a few will understand its meaning before the scene changes entirely. Your eyes follow a third man now, emerging from the main lobby and moving toward the boutique arcade. He walks with the unbothered air of someone late for an appointment. If you didn't know better, you'd believe it. But you do know better. His right hand stays tucked in his coat pocket, and you'd wager it's holding something with more bite than a wallet. The breach is complete. There's no going back now. Not for them. Not for you as a witness to this silent fracture in the Ritz's immaculate facade. Somewhere, behind that calm exterior, the first seconds of the robbery have begun ticking down, and the rest of Paris is still blissfully unaware. The first sound that truly breaks the Ritz's composure isn't a scream or a shout. It's the crystalline, almost celebratory shatter of glass. It bursts into the air like the pop of a champagne cork, except sharper, meaner, each note tumbling down in bright, lethal fragments. You catch the moment through the boutique's doorway. A hammerhead arcs once, twice, and the display case in front of it blooms into a glittering snowstorm. Diamonds and sapphires, once framed in perfect order, spill into chaos, their reflections scattering across the walls and ceiling. The robbers move with a grace that's almost absurd. There's no fumbling, no panicked grabs. Each hand knows where to land, which piece to take, which to leave. They scoop bracelets like they're lifting coins from a fountain, sweep necklaces into canvas bags that sag under the sudden weight. The few guests inside are frozen mid-step, mid-breath, their bodies caught in an awkward tug between instinct and disbelief. A woman in a fur stole raises her hand to her mouth, but no sound escapes. A man near the doorway edges backward, his eyes flicking toward the street, gauging his own odds of slipping away without drawing attention. You can almost hear the crew's inner clock, ticking down in fractions of seconds. One of them kneels to clear a lower shelf, his movements brisk but precise. The leader stands slightly back, eyes scanning the room, watching not just his team, but the way the Ritz itself reacts. Where the staff are, how quickly the guards are moving, whether the guests are edging closer or farther away. The fringe part of your mind recalls something strange you once read, that in the early 1900s, Paris jewelers sometimes kept trained dogs inside their shops at night. Not guard dogs in the traditional sense, but ones taught to bark only at the sound of breaking glass. Here, in this century, the bark comes from the alarm system, an abrupt, high-pitched wail that finally tears the air open. Still, the robbers don't flinch. They know they have a cushion, seconds, not minutes, before the real response kicks in. You watch a bag fill to the zipper's edge, the metal teeth straining. A necklace slips through a gloved hand and clinks against the marble floor, but no one bends to retrieve it. Efficiency, not greed, rules here. From the doorway, a concierge hovers, his face pale but his posture still formal. As if even in the middle of a heist, the Ritz must not lose its poise entirely. Behind him, the doormen are no longer just part of the scenery. One is speaking quickly into a radio, the other scanning the square for the first sign of police. Inside, the final case shatters. The sound feels colder now, less like champagne, and more like ice breaking underfoot. And just like that, the crew pivots. Bags over shoulders, feet finding the path they've practiced until it lived in their bones. They don't run, not yet. The running comes outside. You exhale, realizing your fingers are clenched inside your pockets. The air smells faintly of perfume and dusted glass, an oddly intoxicating mix. Somewhere beyond the square, Paris still hums along, unaware that in this small, glittering world, the storm is already here. They move like water poured into a funnel, fast, narrowing, impossible to stop without blocking the whole flow. The bags on their shoulders bulge unnaturally, swinging with the weight of a few million euros worth of sparkle. You can hear the faint clink of metal against metal as they walk, a strange, almost cheerful sound if you didn't know it was the song of stolen treasure. The leader glances at his watch, once sharply, before giving a short nod. That's the signal. Suddenly, the pace shifts. Steps stretch into longer strides, shoulders angle forward, and the group flows toward the exit in a single unbroken motion. From the corner of your eye, you see a young guest in slippers and a silk robe standing just outside the lobby, frozen like a deer in headlights. His gaze is fixed on the bag slung over one robber's back, his expression caught somewhere between awe and outrage. He doesn't move when the men pass within inches of him. You suspect he'll be dining out on this story for years. Inside the boutique, two clerks are crouched near the shattered cases, hands hovering as though afraid to touch the destruction. One murmurs something about under 2 minutes. It's almost reverent, the way a craftsman might admire a rival's perfect work. The robbers don't break formation. The man at the rear keeps glancing over his shoulder, not with panic but calculation. Checking the angles, measuring how much of the street outside is still theirs before the sirens arrive. The leader pushes through the side door into the cold, Rue Cambon yawning before them like a ready-made escape chute. Here's where the clock's second hand starts to scream. 2 minutes to gather, 30 seconds to cross the threshold. And now what? 90 seconds before the first police car hits the square, maybe less if someone happened to be nearby. You feel it in your chest, that strange compression of time where every sound sharpens. Fringe memory. You once read about a jewelry snatch in Marseille where the thieves kept a stopwatch running throughout, just to prove to themselves later how precise they'd been. This crew, they don't need the watch. The timing is etched in muscle memory. They round the corner, slipping briefly from your view. You follow at a distance, your shoes whispering against the cobblestones. Ahead, the leader is already swinging onto a scooter, its engine coughing to life. Another man jumps onto the back, hugging the duffel close like a child. The remaining one veers toward a side alley, perhaps toward another vehicle, perhaps toward a dead drop. Splitting up makes them harder to chase, but it also means trust, the kind of trust built only through long, silent rehearsals. The street holds its breath. And then, faint but rising, the first wail of a siren slices through the cold air. The siren's cry threads through the street, high and sharp, bouncing off stone facades until it feels like it's coming from everywhere at once. You track it instinctively, but your eyes are fixed on the faces of the bystanders. There's a split second before recognition sets in, when they're still trying to decide if this is just Paris being Paris or something entirely different. The guests nearest the boutique doors remain rooted, as though their brains are still buffering. One man, still clutching his morning newspaper, cranes his neck to peer inside. His expression shifts from curiosity to disbelief as his gaze catches on the splintered glass and glitter-strewn floor. He looks over at you, his mouth opening like he's about to say something, but nothing comes out. Two robbers push past a pair of startled tourists. The taller one doesn't break stride. He simply tilts his head down enough to avoid colliding. They slip between a delivery van and a lamppost, the duffels swinging like pendulums, heavy with their haul. The scooter roars away from the curb now, its tires scraping over the uneven cobblestones. The rider leans low, weaving between parked cars, the bag clutched in his partner's arms bouncing lightly with each jolt. Behind them, Rue Cambon curves, offering a few precious seconds of cover before the street opens into a busier artery of the city. Inside the Ritz, a small knot of guests has gathered, drawn to the boutique entrance like moths to a strange, sparkling flame. One woman whispers that she thought she heard champagne bottles popping. Another swears she saw a man holding what looked like a sledgehammer disguised as an umbrella. Your eyes flick to the security staff. One guard is speaking rapidly into a radio, his voice sharp enough to cut through the murmur. Another has stepped outside, scanning the square in short, jerky bursts, his gaze darting to every moving vehicle. The doormen, still impeccably dressed, have shed their composure. Their stances are wider now, as if bracing against the cold, or against whatever comes next. Fringe detail. You remember reading about a London robbery where the thieves had planned their exit to coincide with a traffic light change, timing their getaway to slip through as it turned green. Looking at the way these men are disappearing down the street, you wonder if Paris traffic will grant them the same gift. The sirens are louder now. You can feel them in your chest. Somewhere beyond the curve, the city is waking fully to what's happening, its heartbeat spiking. The robbers don't look back. They know the sound is chasing them, but they also know that hesitation is poison. A man in the crowd mutters, "Gone in less than 3 minutes," like he's timing it for sport. And in that moment, you realize the truth. For everyone watching, this is already a story to tell over dinner. But for the men vanishing into the city's maze, it's still a race against the clock. You follow the curve of Rue Cambon, just far enough to glimpse the tail end of the movement. A scooter vanishing into traffic, the gleam of a helmet catching a pale shaft of winter sun. The sound of its engine blurs into the larger city noise, swallowed by the churn of delivery trucks, taxis, and impatient drivers leaning on their horns. The rest of the crew is already fragmenting. One man cuts left into a narrow passage barely wide enough for 2 people to walk shoulder to shoulder. Another blends into a stream of pedestrians heading toward the Madeleine, his pace casual, his duffel now slung at a lower, lazier angle. They are slipping into anonymity, and the street is complicit. You stop at the corner, scanning for them, but Paris's labyrinth does its work. Alleys that bend without warning, courtyards hidden behind wrought iron gates, doorways that open into stairwells without signage. Every path is a magician's sleeve. Somewhere behind you, the sirens arrive in full. A police car barrels into Place Vendôme, its blue lights flashing in sharp bursts that bounce off the glass facades. Another pulls up from the opposite end of the street, effectively sealing off one exit, but it's too late for that to matter. Inside the Ritz, the boutique is now a hive of activity. Uniformed officers stepping carefully around shattered glass, staff speaking in quick, clipped phrases, a few guests filming on their phones despite being told not to. You catch a fragment of radio chatter from one officer. 3 males, dark clothing, full-face helmets, last seen heading toward Rue Saint-Honoré. The description is as vague as a shadow. Fringe detail. You recall a case in Antwerp where thieves used identical scooters to mislead pursuers, scattering in different directions until the police no longer knew which to follow. Watching the way this crew moves, you wouldn't be surprised if 2 other scooters are idling somewhere nearby, ready to join the mix. A courier van blocks your view for a moment, and when it passes, the man with the lazier stride is gone. He could be through a doorway, into the metro, or simply turned a corner. That's the beauty and curse of a city like Paris. You can vanish completely in less than a block. An officer brushes past you, his boots thudding on the cobblestones, his eyes scanning every face like a scanner searching for a barcode. You meet his gaze for half a second before he moves on. The police are hunting, but the prey has dissolved into the city's bloodstream. You glance toward the far end of the street, where a lone motorbike cuts through traffic. You can't tell if it's part of the getaway or just another Parisian in a hurry. Either way, the moment for certainty has passed. The phantom route has done its job, leaving only noise, confusion, and the scent of cold air disturbed by fast movement. The sirens slice through the winter air now, not a distant warning but a physical presence, the sound bouncing off the facades in jagged waves. You watch as 2 police officers sprint toward the boutique entrance, their breath steaming, boots striking the cobblestones in quick, urgent rhythm. Another car brakes hard at the square's edge, tires skidding just enough to make bystanders flinch. A uniformed sergeant, his cap slightly askew from the run, starts barking orders in short bursts. One officer is sent toward Rue Saint-Honoré, another toward the narrower Rue Daniel Casanova, the kind of street where a scooter can disappear into a blur of exhaust and tail lights. The chase has begun, but the quarry is already deep in the city's folds. The Ritz's entrance is a tableau of controlled chaos. Doormen, those immaculately dressed fixtures of calm, are now speaking into earpieces, their eyes scanning the street with a sharpness you didn't see before. A concierge you noticed earlier is scribbling something on a notepad, maybe license plate numbers, maybe just fragments of memory before they slip away. Inside the boutique, the wail of the alarm has finally been silenced, leaving behind the softer sounds of investigation. The click of a camera taking crime scene shots, the muffled voices of officers questioning staff. Through the glass, you spot the glittering wreckage. Glass shards catching the light, empty velvet stands gaping like missing teeth. A young officer crouches low, using tweezers to pick up a small diamond that somehow escaped the looter's sweep, slipping it into an evidence bag as if it were a rare insect. Fringe memory bubbles up. A heist in Milan where police recovered a single ruby from the scene, the only one missed by the thieves. It became a kind of talisman for the investigating team, the red stone sitting in the captain's office until the case was closed. You wonder if this lone diamond will earn the same role here. The crowd outside has thickened. Some people hold up phones to record the scene despite being waved back. Others linger just to catch the gossip in real time, whispering theories that range from the mundane, probably just a smash and grab, to the cinematic. It must be the Pink Panthers. A patrol motorcycle tears through the square, its siren momentarily drowning everything else. The rider gestures toward the Madeleine before accelerating away, perhaps following a sighting, perhaps chasing nothing but a hunch. That's the trouble now. So much of the chase is guesswork. The air tastes different now, cooler, sharper, carrying the faint tang of metal and broken glass. You realize the adrenaline in the square is no longer just the robbers. The police have caught it too. The whole scene feels like a pulse you can't quite match. Too fast, too fragmented, but alive in every direction. It happens in the smallest sliver of a second. One of those moments you could almost miss if you were looking the wrong way. A figure, dark coat zipped to the throat, cuts down a narrow side street just off Rue Cambon. The movement isn't hurried enough to scream flight, but there's a stiffness in the stride, a faint overcompensation, like someone trying to carry weight without showing it. A nearby officer spots it too. His shout cracks the air, short and sharp, and suddenly he's in motion. Boots hammering against the stones, hand at his radio, the officer gives chase. You catch the ripple of surprise through the crowd, gasps, a few raised phones, a man muttering, "Ilis eno and tion." The suspect glances back, and for a heartbeat you see the calculation in his eyes. He could drop the bag, cut through a courtyard, vanish. Instead, he pushes forward, banking hard at the next corner. But speed is against him. The bag on his shoulder, too heavy, too awkward, throws his balance off. They vanish from view for maybe 4 seconds. Then they reappear, closer together now, the officer lunging, catching fabric. The suspect stumbles. The bag swings wide and hits the pavement with a muffled thud that's somehow heavier than the sound should allow. By the time you close the distance, the man is against the wall, one hand pinned, his breath coming fast. The officer's voice is firm but not shouting, the kind of tone meant to keep control rather than escalate. Another policeman arrives, and together they work quickly, securing wrists, retrieving the bag. When the zipper opens, there's no mistaking it, the dull gleam of velvet pouches, the harder sparkle of what's inside them. A necklace slips partway out, catching a shard of afternoon light before being pushed back in. One officer whistles low, a sound that cuts through the clamor of radios and the shuffling crowd. Fringe detail. You recall a case in Geneva where an arrested thief tried to claim he'd found the jewels in a dumpster. The police let him talk for nearly 20 minutes before showing him the CCTV footage. Here, the officers don't bother with questions yet. They just lift the bag as evidence, the weight of it speaking louder than anything else. The suspect's expression has already shifted from flight to something more guarded. He says nothing, even as he's guided toward the patrol car. The crowd follows at a careful distance, hungry for the sight of him being driven away. Somewhere behind you, a woman whispers, "That's one," as though it's the opening score in a game that isn't over yet. And she's right, because if there's one thing you've learned, it's that a crew built this carefully doesn't fall apart just because one player is down. They walk him toward the patrol car, the suspect's sneakers leaving damp prints on the cobblestones, each step a slow surrender. The irony isn't lost on you. Those pristine white soles probably cost more than most people's rent, now scuffed by the same streets that just betrayed him. An officer opens the rear door, guiding him in with a firm hand at the shoulder. The crowd leans subtly forward, the way people do at concerts when they want to catch a final glimpse before the performer leaves the stage. But here, the applause is replaced by the low murmur of speculation. How much he had on him, if he'll talk, if the rest of the crew is already across the city line. The bag sits on the hood of the patrol car for a moment, its zipper slightly open, just enough for the camera flashes to catch what's inside. A flash of white gold, a halo of diamonds. A younger officer holds it steady while another takes photographs, each click punctuated by the sound of radios squawking updates from other units. You edge closer, enough to overhear 2 officers conferring. One mutters something about half the haul possibly being in that bag. The other shakes his head. "No, too light," he says, lifting it slightly. Either they split it, or he's the decoy. That word, decoy, sticks. You picture the crew's rehearsals, the meticulous timing, the way they split after the boutique. Of course they'd planned for this, sacrificing one man to buy the other's time. Whether he volunteered or drew the short straw, you'll never know. Fringe memory, In a robbery years back in Lyon, a crew planted one member with a small stash of fake jewels, letting him get caught while the real prize rode away in a taxi 2 blocks over. The police paraded the arrest in front of the press, only to realize weeks later they'd been played. The suspect says nothing as the door closes behind him, the muted thunk sealing him off from the noise outside. The patrol car pulls away slowly, weaving through the onlookers. Heads turn, following it until it disappears into the flow of Paris traffic. You glance back toward the Ritz. The scene there hasn't calmed. The boutique still glitters with the wrong kind of light, officers still pace between doorways, and the murmur of speculation hasn't thinned. One arrest is just the start. The rest of the crew is out there, and every passing minute puts more distance between them and this square. And yet, you can't help thinking, maybe that's exactly the way they wanted it. Back inside the Ritz, the investigation has taken on a strange sort of choreography. Officers moving in deliberate patterns, photographing, measuring, collecting. The boutique feels colder now, not just from the draft of the open door, but from the way the glassless display cases gape like wounds. You drift closer to one of the crime scene technicians, who is crouched over the marble floor with a small flashlight. The beam catches something, a faint glint that's not quite glass. She plucks it up with tweezers and holds it under the light. A diamond, no bigger than a fingernail clipping, resting in a shard of broken velvet. She drops it into a tiny evidence bag with the care you'd give a rare insect specimen. It's easy to think of jewels as untouchable, but they leave traces. Even the smallest stone can betray its journey. Scratches on the metal prongs, residues from the wearer's skin, or in some cases, microscopic imperfections that serve like fingerprints. You've heard stories of stones being identified years after thefts because of unique inclusions invisible to the naked eye. That's the irony of this glittering loot. Despite its anonymity in the public eye, much of it can be traced, at least in theory. Certain houses keep meticulous records of their most valuable pieces. High-resolution photographs, serial numbers on watch movements, even hidden hallmarks etched beneath clasps. In the right hands, these details can pull a stolen jewel out of the shadows. Fringe fact: in one high-profile New York case, a diamond necklace was recovered after being spotted in a celebrity's music video. The jeweler had memorized a microscopic flaw in one of the stones, something only visible under magnification, but distinctive enough to confirm the match. An officer is now photographing a trail of tiny glass fragments leading toward the boutique's side exit. They don't look like much, just flecks of clear and gold-tinted dust. But to investigators, they're breadcrumbs. Maybe one of the thieves brushed against a display case on the way out, embedding a sliver in his coat. Maybe that sliver will end up in a different arrondissement, or even another country, where it will quietly point back to this morning. The lead investigator, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and an expression carved from stone, is conferring with the store manager. You catch fragments of the conversation: insurance, valuation, CCTV. But the tone makes it clear, this is now a game of patience. The smash and grab took less than 3 minutes. The hunt could take months, or even years. As you stand there, surrounded by glitter that no longer belongs to its glass cages, you realize something. The crew might have left the Ritz, but traces of them are already stitched into the building's memory. Whether those threads will ever be pulled is another question entirely. You step away from the boutique's wreckage, following the current of murmured voices into the quieter hall beyond. Here, away from the shattered glass and flashing cameras, the air feels thicker, like it's holding a secret. 2 uniformed officers stand near a service door, speaking in low tones to a man in a charcoal suit who keeps glancing at the floor. It takes you a moment to realize, this isn't just another staff member. The way his shoes shine, the tailored cut of his jacket, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands. He's someone higher up, someone who shouldn't have been this close to the action. The conversation is hushed, but a few words slip through. Knew beforehand, wasn't on schedule, door already ajar. It's enough to make you pause. The official story might be that the crew broke in with brute force, but what if the door wasn't locked to begin with? Rumors in places like this travel faster than sirens. A chambermaid passing by leans toward another, whispering that one of the night security staff called in sick unexpectedly. A bartender claims he saw an unfamiliar man in the staff corridor 2 nights ago, wearing a Ritz badge, but no name on it. Fringe history floats into your mind, stories of inside jobs stretching back centuries. In 1792, during the French Revolution, the crown jewels were stolen from the Garde Mobile. The thieves, helped by insiders who knew exactly when the guards would be distracted. Here, in this polished maze of gold trim and polite smiles, it's almost impossible to imagine betrayal. The Ritz prides itself on discretion. It sells the illusion that everything is controlled, every moment accounted for. But illusions are just well-dressed lies, and someone could have tailored this one perfectly. The lead investigator appears at the end of the hall, his gaze landing briefly on the suited man before flicking away. It's the kind of glance that says we're not finished. The man in the suit straightens his tie and mutters something about needing to check on a delivery. You watch him go, disappearing through the same service door the officers were eyeing. The latch clicks shut behind him, but it doesn't sound like a lock. The thought settles uncomfortably in your chest. Maybe the crew didn't just outsmart the Ritz from the outside. Maybe they had a whisper guiding them from within. You wander back toward the square, the cold air waking you from the suffocating stillness of the hall. Paris hums around Place Vendôme again, but now you see it differently. Every alley a vein, every scooter a possible getaway. Somewhere, out of sight, the rest of the stolen treasure is on the move. The legitimate jewelry market sparkles in daylight, auction houses, luxury boutiques, private showrooms. But the black market has its own gleam, lit by desk lamps in back rooms and basement workshops. You've read enough to know how it works. Jewels are broken apart, settings melted down, stones recut to lose their distinctive shapes. By the time they reappear, they're unrecognizable to the naked eye. It's not always crude work either. There are specialists who can erase a jewel's identity with the precision of a surgeon. A flawless emerald can be sliced into 2 smaller stones, each without the original's identifying flaws. A custom platinum clasp can be smelted, the metal repurposed for a different commission. Paper trails disappear with the craftsmanship. Fringe fact: in 2013, police in London traced a stolen diamond ring to a pawn shop in Antwerp, except it wasn't a ring anymore. The stone had been reset into a necklace and sold at a fraction of its value to an unsuspecting buyer, who wore it daily without knowing it was contraband. The crew from the Ritz knows this game. Somewhere in the city, maybe even within walking distance of this square, the first steps are already being taken. A quiet handoff to a middleman, a taxi ride to a workshop where the curtains stay closed. You glance at the passers-by, wondering if one of them is carrying a stone worth hundreds of thousands of euros in their coat pocket. The thing about stolen jewels is that they travel light, fit for a getaway in a bag or a glove, small enough to slip into the lining of a jacket. A police van rolls slowly past, the officers inside scanning faces. It's a show of presence, but you can tell they're already chasing ghosts. By now, the treasure could be in Marseille, Brussels, or tucked into the false bottom of a suitcase at Gare du Nord. And if history is any guide, some of those pieces will never return. They'll vanish into private collections, worn quietly at parties where no one asks about provenance. Others will resurface years later, by accident or betrayal, carrying with them the faint echo of this morning in Paris. You find yourself near a corner cafe, the kind with fogged-up windows and a brass espresso machine that hisses like it's in on the gossip. Inside, 2 men in plain clothes are hunched over a laptop, the screen angled just enough for you to catch flashes of CCTV footage, grainy, monochrome, but unmistakably the Ritz boutique. The video loops, 3 figures moving fast but smooth, glass exploding into glitter, bags filling, and then the exit. One man pauses the frame, zooms in on the blur of a helmet visor. It's useless, just a distorted reflection of lights and shadows, but he leans closer anyway, as if sheer willpower could sharpen the pixels. Interpol's involvement is inevitable in cases like this. Jewel theft on this scale doesn't stay inside city limits. The moment the alarm went off at the Ritz, it might as well have rung in Lyon, Milan, Antwerp, Dubai. There's an entire network of alerts, databases full of missing gems, dealer watch lists, customs warnings, designed to flag anything that even smells like it came from a high-profile heist. Fringe detail. You recall reading about the Pink Panther Network, a loosely linked group of jewel thieves so efficient that Interpol created a dedicated file on them. One crew allegedly smuggled diamonds out of a country hidden in a jar of face cream, the stones cushioned in the lotion. The jar passed through customs without a second glance. The officers in the cafe scroll through photos, close-ups of the stolen pieces taken before the robbery. Each image has annotations in French, carat weights, cut types, distinguishing marks. One watch has an engraving so faint it's invisible without magnification. A diamond ring bears a tiny laser inscription along the girdle, an almost invisible ID number. But even with this data, the hunt is a matter of timing. If the crew can get the jewels into the hands of the right fence quickly enough, the transformation process begins, and every day that passes makes recovery harder. You sip the bitter coffee you didn't realize you'd ordered, watching the men work. They're fighting against a clock they can't see, chasing people who are already miles ahead. Not just in distance, but in preparation. Somewhere, maybe in a back room an arrondissement away, a jeweler with no questions is bending over a workbench. The first stolen stone of the Ritz Hall is about to lose its name. The longer you linger in the square, the clearer it becomes. The myth of the perfect heist is more fragile than it looks in the movies. From the outside, what just happened feels almost cinematic. Precision timing, bold execution, a clean getaway for most of the crew. But you've seen enough to know there's no such thing as flawless crime. The cracks are already forming. One man caught. A partial haul recovered. CCTV footage, blurry or not, now in the hands of police. Witnesses with half-formed memories that, when pieced together, could draw a sharper picture than the robbers expect. The problem with the perfect plan is that it has to live in the real world, and the real world is messy. Maybe a guard takes a smoke break 30 seconds early. Maybe a side door jams. Maybe an unplanned delivery van forces a route change. Small deviations can snowball, and the longer the operation lasts, the more chances reality has to interfere. Fringe fact: you remember a jewel heist in Monaco where the thieves rehearsed for months, even learning the exact sound of the boutique security gate so they could time their movements to it. On the day, the gate squealed, something it had never done before, and startled a passerby into looking up. That witness ended up testifying. For the Ritz crew, the mistakes might be invisible now, buried under the adrenaline of pulling it off. But they're there. That one diamond left on the boutique floor. The man caught with the bag. The bystander who noticed a red scarf accidentally spilling oranges before the robbery. Each of these details is a thread, and threads have a way of getting tugged. You lean against a lamppost, watching as officers continue to canvass the area, taking down names, checking IDs, scanning surveillance from nearby shops. Somewhere, an investigator is already sketching a timeline on a whiteboard, drawing arrows from 10:32 a.m. to 10:35 a.m., trying to account for every footstep. The perfect heist exists best in hindsight, retold over drinks or in hushed conversations, polished until the edges disappear. But here, in the cold light of the same morning it happened, you can see the grit under the gloss. And you know the truth. No matter how cleanly it looks on the surface, every job leaves a fingerprint. The question is whether anyone can find it before the trail goes cold. You duck into a small cafe on the edge of the square, the kind where the tables are too close together and the smell of espresso hangs heavy in the air. You're not here for the coffee, you're here for the voices. Parisian gossip is an art form, and this morning it's in full bloom. At the table beside you, two men in tailored coats lean in, their words low but quick. One swears he saw a moped parked near the Ritz 2 nights ago with the same partial license plate that police mentioned on the news. The other laughs. insisting the robbers must have tunneled in from the metro, because no one could be that fast above ground. Near the back, a woman with a tiny dog in her lap is telling anyone who will listen that the thieves were dressed like actors, as though the robbery were part of a film shoot. She says one of them bowed to a guest before smashing a display case, though you can't tell if that's fact or the kind of flourish stories pick up in their first few retellings. Fringe memory. You think of a case in Marseille where, within an hour of the robbery, half the city had a version of the story, each one more theatrical than the last. By the time police pieced together the truth, witnesses swore they'd seen things that never happened: flamethrowers, wild animals, a helicopter. None of it was real, but it became part of the crime's mythos. Here, the theories are multiplying by the minute. Some blame international crime syndicates. Others are sure it's an inside job. A man by the window insists it's the same crew that hit Antwerp, though he can't remember when that was, or even if the details match. Outside, a patrol car cruises slowly past, as if its presence alone could press the city back into order. But inside this cafe, the robbery has already shifted from an event to a legend in the making. People are savoring it, adding their own spice before passing it along. And you can't help thinking, every retelling, true or false, makes it harder for the police to separate noise from fact, which, if the crew is listening, is exactly the kind of cover they'd be counting on. It's late afternoon when you hear about it, a small, almost throwaway line buried in a news update on someone's phone. A single diamond from the Ritz robbery has turned up, not in a pawn shop or a clandestine sale, but somewhere completely absurd: the lost and found office at Gare de Lyon. The details are thin. A railway worker reportedly found a velvet pouch in the corner of a bench near Platform M. Inside, cushioned in the folds, was a pear-shaped diamond that, according to initial checks, matches one of the pieces taken in the heist. No bag, no other jewels, just the single stone, sitting quietly as if it had been waiting for someone to notice it. You can't help but imagine the possibilities. Maybe it slipped loose during a handoff. Maybe it was deliberately planted to confuse investigators, to make them think the robbers' route included the train station. Or maybe, and this is the most unsettling thought, it's a message left where it would inevitably be found. Fringe precedent. In 2008, during the Harry Winston heist in Paris, a ring from the stolen haul was anonymously returned to the police months later, wrapped in plain brown paper. No explanation. No suspect attached. Just an object finding its way back, like a stray animal. At the Ritz, news of the diamond's discovery stirs a ripple through the investigative team. An officer you saw earlier in the boutique mutters that someone's playing with us. Another suggests the diamond might have been used as payment for a favor and then discarded when things got too hot. You stand at the edge of the square, looking toward Rue Cambon, and picture the crew scattered across the city. Somewhere, they're hearing about this too. If the diamond was lost, someone's furious. If it was planted, someone's smiling. Either way, the stone's journey isn't over. It's just taken a detour that no one, not even the robbers, could have scripted. You find yourself in the back of a courtroom weeks later. The air stale with that particular mix of old wood, damp coats, and quiet tension. The first suspect, the one caught with the duffel, sits in the dock, flanked by two guards. He looks smaller here, stripped of the momentum and adrenaline of that morning. His designer sneakers have been swapped for plain canvas shoes, his wrists free now but resting heavily in his lap. The prosecution moves with a kind of calm aggression, laying out the timeline in crisp strokes. CCTV stills, police radio logs, photographs of the seized bag. The diamond necklace, now safely in an evidence vault, makes an appearance in high-resolution images projected onto the courtroom wall. Every facet sparkles under the fluorescent light, a silent witness to its own theft. The defense counters by leaning into doubt, questioning the reliability of witnesses, pointing out gaps in the footage, suggesting that the bag could have changed hands more than once before being found with their client. They don't have to prove innocence, just fracture the narrative enough to let uncertainty seep in. Fringe reminder: You once read about a jewel heist trial in Geneva where the defense argued that the accused was merely retrieving the jewels for safekeeping after stumbling upon them. It didn't work, but it muddied the waters enough to delay sentencing for months. Here, the same tactic is in play. The defense attorney, a man with a voice like a velvet rope, smooth, controlled, asks the arresting officer why the suspect was apprehended only a few blocks from the scene, implying that a real getaway would have taken him far from Paris by then. The officer replies evenly, "Because we were fast enough to catch him." At one point, the judge pauses to remind the room that only part of the stolen property has been recovered. The words hang in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that most of the haul and most of the crew are still out there. You watch the suspect lean toward his lawyer, whisper something, and then sit back with the faintest smirk. It's not the expression of a man confident in acquittal. It's the look of someone who knows the rest of the story is happening far beyond these walls. You return to the Ritz months later, not for the jewelry, most of it is still gone, but to hear what the building itself has to say. It's quieter now, the memory of that morning tucked neatly beneath layers of polish and routine. The doormen stand as they always do, straight-backed and poised, but their eyes track more than they used to. Inside, the boutique wing has been restored. The glass is flawless again, the displays rebuilt, each necklace and ring arranged as though nothing ever happened. But you can feel it in the air, an alertness woven into the fabric of the place. The staff carry themselves differently now, less like curators of beauty and more like sentinels. You speak briefly with a clerk who'd been there during the heist. She keeps her tone even, her smile professional, but she admits, "We still look at everyone twice." She tells you about new protocols, subtle ones, invisible to guests but ingrained in the staff. Shifts altered to avoid predictable patterns, display cases reinforced, silent alarms installed at knee height. Fringe parallel. After a similar robbery in Dubai, a luxury mall rebuilt its jewelry wing with double-layered glass that could withstand a sledgehammer for over a minute. It was never tested in a real robbery, but the mere fact of it changed how both staff and customers behaved inside. At the Ritz, the visible changes are minimal. No one wants the place to feel like a fortress. But there are more cameras now, tucked discreetly into corners and under gilded moldings. The concierge admits that some are monitored off-site in real time, a precaution they hadn't considered before. You wander past the spot where the glass once exploded into glittering snow. The marble floor is spotless, but you imagine the sound anyway. The sharp crack, the collective gasp, the heartbeat that followed. For the Ritz, the robbery wasn't just a loss in carats and euros. It was a crack in its aura, a reminder that even the most controlled spaces are vulnerable. And though the marble and gold gleam as they always have, the building remembers. You see him by accident, one of the crew, years later. At least, you're almost certain it's him. The hair is shorter, the shoulders narrower, and the swagger has been sanded down to something quieter. But the eyes are the same. He's sitting alone at a cafe table in Belleville, a chipped mug in front of him, and a cigarette burning low between his fingers. No duffel bag this time, no quick glances over his shoulder. He looks like any other man waiting for nothing in particular. But there's a stillness to him, the kind you only see in people who've lived through very fast moments and learned to survive the aftermath. You've heard bits of what happened to the others. One is serving a sentence in Fleury-Mérogis. Another vanished entirely, last rumored to be in Morocco. The rest? Names that still float through investigative files, attached to question marks and stale leads. The hall itself, most of it, remains a ghost. Fringe recollection. In an old case from the 90s, a French robber who'd once made headlines was spotted years later working in a bakery. Not because he'd gone straight, but because baking started before dawn, and he preferred the quiet hours when the city wasn't looking. The man in front of you doesn't look poor, but he doesn't look rich either. If he took his share, maybe it's long gone, spent, hidden, or buried so deep it's no longer reachable without risking everything. Or maybe he never saw it at all, cut out before the split. He catches you looking and offers a nod. Not recognition, but acknowledgement, the way strangers sometimes do when they're both killing time. Then he goes back to staring at nothing, as if that's all he has left to guard. The crew's legend has faded, the headlines replaced by newer scandals, fresher crimes. But in this quiet corner of Paris, the echo of that morning still sits at a cafe table, drinking slowly and not saying a word. It's easy to think the draw of jewels is about money, but watching the way people talk about the Ritz robbery years later, you realize it's something else entirely. These stones, cut, polished, set in gold, carry a kind of gravitational pull. They're more than objects. They're condensed symbols of status, desire, and the fantasy of untouchable beauty. You overhear it one afternoon in a Marais antique shop. A young couple leans over a glass counter, admiring a modest diamond ring. The man jokes, not quite Ritz material, and the shopkeeper laughs knowingly, as if they've all just referenced a shared piece of folklore. The robbery has slipped into the city's cultural shorthand. Fringe fact: during the Great Depression, jewelry thefts in Paris actually spiked. Not because people needed money, but because the press coverage made jewels seem like the last glittering escape from austerity. The myth of the jewel as an ultimate prize is stubborn. It survives through recessions, wars, and police crackdowns. For some, the allure is ownership, the private pleasure of locking away something priceless in a safe. For others, it's the act of taking it, the adrenaline rush of crossing an unspoken boundary. The Ritz robbery sits at that intersection, a perfect storm of audacity and opulence. You think about the crew often, how they must have felt in the minutes after the smash and grab, the weight of those bags, the pounding of blood in their ears. The stolen pieces weren't just currency. They were trophies, proof that they'd breached a world most people only see through glass. Even now, the Ritz has rebuilt its aura, but that morning left a fingerprint that can't be polished away. Guests still pause in the boutique wing, glancing at the displays just a second too long, maybe imagining themselves on the wrong side of the glass. And somewhere, perhaps in a drawer or a display case half a world away, a stone from that hall still catches the light, its value intact, its story unspoken. The city exhales slowly, though you can't tell if it's relief or resignation. Place Vendôme gleams again under the Paris sun, the facade scrubbed of that morning's chaos. Tourists snap photos beside the column, unaware, or maybe only vaguely aware, that this elegant square once played host to a robbery bold enough to shake the Ritz itself. Inside, the boutique wing hums quietly. Jewelry rests once more under glass, each piece lit like a tiny stage. The staff smile as they always have, but their eyes track movements with a subtle precision, cataloging faces, noting bags, marking exits. Security is tighter now, unseen layers added like invisible armor, but the Ritz has preserved its image of seamless luxury. You pause by the spot where the first display case shattered. The marble floor shows no scar, but in your mind you still see the spray of glass, the blur of gloved hands, the glittering arc of a necklace midair. Those seconds, so fast and violent, now live only in memory, CCTV footage, and whispered retellings. Fringe parallel. In Venice, a jewelry store once rebuilt entirely after a famous heist, reopening in the same location with the same layout. Locals said it was a statement that beauty and risk could coexist without one canceling the other. The Ritz has done the same. Outside, the square feels different, though nothing has changed physically. Maybe it's the knowledge that even in the most guarded spaces, doors can open the wrong way. Maybe it's the realization that the people who pulled this off are, for the most part, still out there, living quietly or loudly, but living nonetheless. The Paris winter light slides across the cobblestones, slow and golden. The moment is gone, but its echo remains, stitched into the air of the square, into the way the staff glance twice at the boutique entrance, into the way your own footsteps sound just a fraction louder here. And as you turn away, the Ritz stands as it always has, beautiful, guarded, and perhaps a little wiser. The day softens as you leave Place Vendôme behind, the clamor of the city folding into something gentler. The streets stretch long and slow, the kind that let your thoughts unwind without rushing to meet them. Paris moves at its usual pace now, pedestrians in no particular hurry, the distant echo of a street musician's accordion weaving through the air. You think of the Ritz, not as a stage for chaos, but as it stands now, quiet, polished, its heartbeat steady again. The robbery has become part of its private history, like a shadow tucked neatly behind a curtain. Inside, the glass is whole, the velvet smooth, and the jewels shine without trembling. Somewhere, in another city or perhaps another continent, a stone from that hall may still catch the light in a private room, passed from one hand to another without a single word spoken about where it's been. And somewhere else, perhaps only a few streets away, one of the crew might walk by you unnoticed, carrying nothing at all, yet carrying everything they took. The details blur over time, but the shape of the moment remains. The air that morning was cold. The glass shattered bright. The sirens chased shadows they could not quite hold. You let the thought drift, replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own steps. The city exhales around you, its stories endless, its secrets deep, its beauty undiminished. Paris doesn't cling too tightly to moments, even the sharp ones. It lets them settle, lets them fade into the folds of its streets, where they wait quietly for someone curious enough to find them again. And for now, the Ritz keeps its calm, the jewels sleep in their glass cases, and the square basks in the fading light.